2 in 3 women under the age of 30 have a boyfriend. Only 1 in 3 men. Why? Because women are dating older. 24-year-old women are dating a 38-year-old guy. So the young guy has no options because any kind of high status or remotely, shit together woman is going older. If you're doing side hustles, that means you have the wrong main hustle.
People are staring at everybody's lifestyle, and it's very popular and hashtag friendly to be an entrepreneur and do all these side hustles.
Women are attracted to guys who are in shape, who make a lot of money, and have a decent amount of facial hair. They essentially want a caveman with an Amex card.
Women are drawn to those guys. Andrew Tate has no problem finding women. Yeah, there are a lot of women who hate him, but guess what? He's not hurting. My audience is obsessed with you anyway. I always get a gazillion comments and messages whenever I post anything. Yeah, isn't it? We have a lot of entrepreneurs who follow and high performance. You're doing really well.
I track I'm very competitive. You're right. I mean, you're constantly beating us all the time. Anyways, you're doing really well.
Thank you. Well, I'm neck and neck with you. Like you've been crushing. I mean, now you have 3 podcasts?
Yeah, to resist is futile. Anyways, let's jump right into it, and I'll make all these jokes. I want to save this comedy gold for the tape.
By the way, this is the podcast. We started.
Yes. Oh, we're on? Okay. So we're on.
Yeah, no, so your stand-up comedy is very well received already. Good. And it's I appreciate and invite it. So yeah, me and Scott just, I always send you our little top charts, and I'm always right beside you. But I notice every time I send it to you, you have another podcast show that you add. So you're going to have the entire business section in the next 2 months.
I'm like AOL in the 90s. To resist is futile. If you stick your hand in a cereal box, you're going to pull out a pod from us. I'm like, it's not quality. Just surround them.
It's exactly what. Well, listen, it's working because, well, first of all, let me tell everybody, his new book is called The Algebra of Wealth. And if you have not read it or picked it up, you're basically living under a rock, possibly, because it's so popular, especially in the business entrepreneurial space. It's very well done. Amazing nuggets of gold information in there. So great job yet again.
Thanks very much. Yeah, very greatness in the agency of other. About 6 people worked on the book. But yeah, thank you.
6 people. Wow. I mean, that's a lot of people. And are you how are you able, quite honestly, you're literally like Waldo. I was just saying off camera, I check you out and you are in New York, you're in London, you're speaking in Vegas, you're writing books, you're doing 3 podcasts. How are you, time is and you talk about this in your book, is the most valuable asset. How are you able to do all these things and do them well?
So I meant what I said before. Greatness in the agency of others. People constantly say to me, you must work around the clock. And I don't work more than 30 hours a week. Hold on a second.
They're taking calls in my podcast. I mean, you're working diligently and constantly.
It's a doorbell. We're basically an Amazon distribution center here. No, I have. So people think it's me. Prof is a media company. We have 14 people. I have 3 data analysts, 2 tech people, a videographer, a creative person, an editor-in-chief. And I like building small companies. And we produce a great deal of content. I really enjoy it. But be clear, I used to work when I was your age, I was working around the clock. And now I've decided that the reason I moved to Europe is I think US is the best place to make money and Europe is the best place to spend it. And I'm in the spending part of my life. I do Prop G Media because I want to talk about things that are important to me, struggling young men, Israel, big tech. But I'm now in the privileged position in my life where there's 3 buckets in life. There's things you have to do. If your biggest investors in town or, your in-laws are in town, you got to have dinner with them, whatever it is, things you have to do. There's things you want to do, right? You just went to Israel. I'm going to the south of France. I'm going to the Cannes Creativity Festival, which I'm really excited about. And there's things you should do. And you build your career doing things you should do. Going to a networking function, going to South by Southwest and speaking on a panel where you might get some exposure. I have eliminated the should bucket from my life. And I only do things I have to do or that I want to do. And I didn't take outside money for the first time for this company because I don't want to be responsible to anyone but paying my employees really well, which we're able to do. And we produce a ton of content. I'm working with really talented people. But be clear, when you see something I put out, it's a bunch of other people producing it. I'm just the talent that they prop up and press play. It's kind of Weekend at Bernie's. I got other people carrying me around.
I love that analogy. It's so funny. What can I mean, I want to start this podcast because you've been on many times. We talk about, we're going to get into Israel. We're going to get into your book and all those other great fun things. But, I've seen you really like your trajectory of recently has really spiked and people really respond to what you say and your content. What do you think your secret sauce is? Like, what is your superpower that's really, you think, why people are responding the way they are?
First off, that you're being very generous. And what I'll say is after working my ass off for 30 years, I'm an overnight success. I mean, this wasn't like I woke up and all of a sudden I was on Morning Joe. I have been working my ass off. And I feel like I'm rounding third and taking some of those accolades. I know how hard you work. In terms of like my core competence, my superpower as an individual is storytelling. I get a lot of practice. I stand in front of 300 people twice a week. I know how to craft a narrative. I know how to move people, I think, to think differently. Use of data and humor softens the beach such that it opens their mind to new ideas. And I can craft a narrative and, an arc and the cadence and delivery of that. I think that's my superpower. My core competence is the ability to attract and retain really good people who can leverage that storytelling, that skill. As, see above, Prof G is 14 people. I think the reason that my content is resonating right now, and it's easy to pat yourself on the back, is I'm running into the fire. I'm talking about the struggles that young men face. When I started talking about it 5 years ago, it was seen as thinly veiled misogyny, and I got a lot of pushback. I talk about Israel, and you know as well as I do, you get a lot of pushback. I have very young viewers. My podcast downloads went down 12%, which is a lot in 1 week when I started talking about Israel. And we're in a subscription model. So for people to purposely unsubscribe and you're down 12% and you're growing 20 to 30% year on year, it means you're doing something wrong. And that something wrong was saying to a young audience that I think you are part of a zombie apocalypse of useful idiots in terms of your views. And I've used that terminology. And the wonderful thing about having some economic security and people who in your life who love you unconditionally is that you can speak your mind. So I'd like to think that over the medium and the long term, you pay some short-term dues, but the difference between an opinion and a principle is you're willing to sacrifice for a principle. But I talk about things that are, I don't call them risky, but I run into the fire. I talk about whatever interests me. I talk about that I think DEI should be disassembled on campuses, that higher ed is corrupt, and we are the new enforcers of the caste system, which doesn't, warm the hearts of my colleagues. But I think if you come at stuff as an honest broker, you speak your mind in an environment that's increasingly starched, where people are thinking about how many likes will I get and how many people will I not offend here, I think people are ready for someone to run into the fire, if you will. And in addition, lately, I'm a straight white male that talks about emotions, talks about his failures, talks about my relationship with my sons. And I think especially young men really appreciate that, because I think there's so many young men who are struggling and have a difficult time articulating how disappointing it is when your career doesn't work. And I've had those disappointments. So disappointing when you have unrequited love, right? So disappointing to feel alone. And I've been through all of that shit, so I relate to it and I talk about it. And a lot of it, Jen, it's just luck. Just luck. Why is this book selling better than my others? I'm not sure. I don't know. A lot of it's luck. So anyways.
How much do you think is luck versus talent versus talent? How much of it is luck?
What I would say is that being talented is table stakes. And if you're a genius, if you're in the top 0.1%, you kind of don't need luck. The rest of us need a certain amount of luck. What I'll say is that being hardworking, being talented every week, I don't even think of it as talent. I think of it as iteration. And that is, you got to have some basic talent, but then every week, just like, okay, looking at the data, what can we make a little bit better? How can we make this dialogue a little tighter? How can the music be a little bit better? What can we learn? Constant iteration. The first podcast I did had 1,700 downloads. We'll do, every one of them now gets 200 to 350,000 downloads, but it's never been a giant step change up. Luck is enormous because my narrative up until the age of 40 was, check me out. I was raised by a single immigrant mother that lived and died a secretary. I overcame all of this and to become a baller, like I am man, hear me roar. And then as you get older, you become more thoughtful. And I realized being born a white heterosexual male in California in the 60s, meant I had access to free education, UCLA and Berkeley, $7,000 total tuition all 7 years. I had access. It was a 76% admissions rate when I applied. I had to apply twice, true story. It's now a 9% admissions rate. I came of age when the internet was coming, or professional age when the internet was coming on board. So a guy with a good rap and a shaved head could raise hundreds of millions of dollars, which I did. I've had some wonderful women in my life. My kids are, I mean, fucking A. I'm not humble, Jen. I think I'm in the top 1%. The top 1% puts you in a room with the population of Germany. My life is better than the 75 million most talented people in the world, but I made this incredibly smart decision, and that was to be born in California in the 60s. So, yeah, 51% is hard work, 49%, I don't know if luck is 49 or 51%, but I know it's a huge, I tell this story, and it's emotionally manipulative. My freshman roommate at UCLA, so similar to me. And I'm not saying this. I think he was more talented than me. He was creative. He was in the film school, super engaging, super funny. Everybody loves him. Immediately right out of college, incredibly successful, head of television at Disney, youngest head of television at Disney, dead of AIDS at 33, because God reached into his soul and decided he would be gay. I didn't choose to be straight. So luck's played an enormous role. And the thing that upsets me the most about some of the tech bros that I cover and talk a lot about is they conflate luck with talent. They're under the impression that all of their billions are a function of their talent. And they don't even pull out a map and go, well, how come all of us are littered along the west coast of North America and not above Seattle and Canada, where there's no companies creating billions, or south of La Jolla? We're all in this one region, but it didn't dawn on us that we're incredibly fortunate that we either had the ability to immigrate here or our parents decided to take risks and be here. So I have no delusions. The reason I am here with you right now is because, one, I'm talented, but mostly through the generosity and vision of California taxpayers and the vision of the Regency of the University of California that gave me an unbelievable education for almost no money, and the fact that my parents made the decision to move to America and that I was born here. So, yeah, I think a lot of it is luck.
I mean, luck can get you. So I think luck is a big part, but you also talk a lot about a few things, and it resonates with me anyway. Like you say, habits obviously really play a major integral role in how successful you become, right? Habits, exercise, number one, right? There's a definite correlation. I mean, how often are you exercising, by the way? Every day?
No. So I'm inspired. I follow you and I feel weak. I've worked out 4 times. I've worked out 4 times a week for 40 years. That's my fitness secret. I don't have any crazy methods or diet. I eat whatever I want. I drink whatever I want. I've worked out 4 times a week for 40 years. And I've been 6'2", 187 pounds. I've toggled between 186 and 188. So I'm the same weight no matter what I do. I have kind of body dysmorphia. I always feel too skinny, and I have to lift to keep weight on. It's hard for me to do cardio, but working out for me has been my antidepressant. I struggle with anger and depression, and the only thing that sort of keeps me level is resistance training and pretty serious cardio. It's when I can't work out because I'm on the road or I get lazy, I start getting angry at myself. I start blaming others. I start doing this shitty, weird role playing where I imagine confrontations or arguments with other people that don't exist. And I have to be like, what the fuck is going on with me right now? And I realize, I'm eating shitty food because I'm on the road. I'm not around my boys. I'm not around my dogs. I don't have anyone's physical touch. I don't have intimacy. I don't have affection. I don't have sex. I don't have working out. And I start to go into this really dark downward place. But whenever I'm down, the first thing I do is I sweat. It's like turning the computer off and on for me.
Yeah, I agree. I'm the same way with that, except I don't struggle with the anger portion, but the depression's the best antidepressant on the market. Agreed. And completely under-indexed. Okay, let's get into this book. So other things that you talk about in the book is have rich friends, make rich friends. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I'm not suggesting you ask for the W-2 of anyone you hang out with. The larger point is there's just a lot of studies that show you're the sum and the average of the 5 people you hang out with. And I think that you should aspire to have really successful, high character, impressive friends. And even you're a parent, I'm a parent. We like to think that we're engineers, that we engineer the sheep. We don't. We're shepherds. We get to choose where our kids graze, the directions they graze in, the food they eat. But the most influential, most kind of important influence on their life is their peer group. And if you look at the 4 or 5 people you hung out with the most between the ages of 15 and 30, you're probably the same body mass index, the same economic weight class, the same political affiliations, the same cities. It's amazing how similar you become. So what I tell, and this is true, if you have the opportunity to establish a relationship with someone who's really impressive, and there's more than just money, but very impressive people tend to attract economic prosperity. And what I'm saying is I wouldn't be afraid to upgrade friends and not stay friends with people just because you went to junior high together. If friends are bringing you down or taxing you or not setting a good example for how you should live your life, I don't think there's a problem, and I know this sounds rapacious, with shedding friends. But more than that, when you have the opportunity to establish a friendship with a really impressive person, high character, funny, interesting, works hard, super successful, get in that room with that person, because a lot of it's the only reason I went to college. My dad told me to buy me a Trans Am when I was in the 10th grade if I didn't go to college, because I didn't need it. I was too smart, according to him. He just didn't want to pay for college. And I said, great. So I wasn't going to go to college. My 2 best friends, Brett Jarvis, a Mormon kid, and Ronnie Drake, a black kid, were just going to college. So it's like, okay, my 2 best friends are going to college, which means I'm going to go to college. If I'd hung out with 2 other guys that just smoked pot and were going to do what I was going to do, install shelving and hang out, that's what I would be doing. So if you want to upgrade your life, upgrade the people, the peer group you hang around with. And then just bridging it to the book, the strange thing about those same 5 people is that even if they all make approximately the same amount of money, one will end up much more financially secure than the other 4, despite not having made much more money than them. And that's the basis of the book. I wanted to look at the character and behaviors and strategies of that one guy or gal that ends up much more economically secure than the other 4, despite not making much more money.
What is wealth to you? And what is the formula to be wealthy?
Sure.
Besides what we just said?
So the definition of rich, in my view, is passive income that's greater than your burn. Passive income is income you get even if you decide not to go to work in the morning. So 2 examples. A close friend of mine runs M&A for an iconic investment bank. He makes between $4 and $10 million a year, depending on the year. He pays a 50% tax rate, living in Connecticut. Between his ex-wife, his alimony, his 3 current kids, his home in the Hamptons, his FlexJet card, his Master of the Universe lifestyle that he believes he's entitled to, which you can understand, he spends almost all of it. And I know that he spends a lot of nights staring at the ceiling, wondering what happens if the music stops. He's not rich. My father, between his Social Security, his Royal Navy pension, he was a frogman in the Royal Navy, and he owns, I think, 8 washing and drying machines in trailer parks where he collects the quarters every day. He makes $52,000 a year. He spends $48,000. His passive income is greater than his burn. He's rich. My father's rich. So people always focus on how much money they're making. Really, how you get wealth and how you get rich is how much money you spend. And so you want to put yourself on a path over time such that you can spend less than you spend less than you make, so you can deploy an army of capital that works for you in the night, compound interest, and hopefully by the time you're my age, your passive income is greater than your burn, and then you are rich. Now, part of that is deciding how much you need. You might decide, I'm going to do a lifestyle arbitrage and move to Costa Rica, so me and my wife only need 80 grand a year to live a really nice life, 35 grand in Social Security. We'll make 10 or 15 grand doing some sort of work, so we need 30 grand in passive income. Times that by 15 to 25, okay, we need $500,000 to $1 million in savings. That's intimidating. But if you got 12 or 15 years to figure that out, because my book is mostly written for young people, but for people who are a little bit older, you know what your burn's going to be. Think about it. Needing another $500,000 over 15 years, it sounds intimidating. It sounds like $100,000 a year. It's not. It's $30,000 or $40,000 a year that you need to not touch and let grow. So rich is passive income greater than your burn. The formula: focus, find something you're good at that other people will pay you for. go into an industry that has a 90+% employment rate. Don't go into sports, modeling, acting, the arts, unless from a very early age you are getting bright green signals that you're in the top 1%. Focus on something you're good at that has a 90+% employment rate. 2, stoicism. Realize no one's thinking about your shit as much as you are. Try to have some discipline around not being the guy that orders a bottle of Grey Goose late at night trying to impress potential mates. Realize that you only need so many pairs of ergonomically impossible shoes. Try and develop a savings muscle. Try and control the things you can. Some things in your career you cannot control. You can control your spending. Try and just, even in your 20s, I'm not suggesting you live like a miser, enjoy yourself, go to Coachella, but try and save $100 a month, maybe 500, maybe you're starting to make money. Because once you have that savings muscle, once you know how to flex it, when you come into your 30s and hopefully start making some money from that focus and your talent, you'll be good at saving money, or you'll at least know how. Some people go through their entire lives, they never learn how to save money. It's like it's like trying to play golf for them all of a sudden. And if they've never done it, they just don't know how to do it. And then appreciate the power of time. My favorite example is I spoke to a private school, the board of a private school in Manhattan. I wanted to send my kids to this Tony school called Grace Church or First Presbyterian, mostly because I'm a narcissist and I wanted to tell people my kids went to First Presbyterian. It's $62,000 a year. And I said to the board, why do parents choose to send their kids here? Well, it's a great spiritual environment. I'm like, okay, come on. There's studies that show if you send them to the nearest school, the public school, the time in the commute is better spent on sleeping, playing. They'll be just as good. Why do people really come here? Like, well, the bottom line is much better chance of getting into an elite school. Okay, why do we care if they go to an elite school? Well, elite schools set you up for economic opportunities and the chance to do something you love and have economic security, find a family, raise a family, buy a home. I'm like, okay. It's bottom line is most of it, let's be honest, is economic security, which is really important in a capitalist society. If you took that $62,000 a year from the age of 4 to 18, and every year you just put it in SPY, a Vanguard index fund that is just passively investing in the S&P 500, and you paid Vanguard that tuition every year and sent your kids to a public school, I want you to assume you were wrong. And those kids get into a shitty college, and then with their shitty college degree, they get a mediocre job. They can't afford a home. They can't find the right mate. And at 35, they're alone and can't afford a home. Well, that's the bad news. The good news is if you paid yourself that tuition, you can give that kid $5.4 million to ease their pain. So if private schools were honest, they would say First Presbyterian or $5.4 million to your kid at 35. But people don't think that way. My first bonus at Morgan Stanley when I was 23, I got $28,000 bonus, so I went out and bought a $35,000 BMW. If I had put that $28,000 in just an index fund, I'm not saying you have to be a genius. You don't have to find the needle in the haystack, buy the whole haystack. I would have enough money for 9 Ferraris now. People don't understand. When you're young, you want to lean into your advantage. When you're young, you have one advantage. You have time. And here's the problem. It sounds easy. It's not. Because young people don't believe they're going to live past 35, because for 99% of our time on this planet, our species has not lived past 35. So it's impossible to imagine you're going to be around another 60 or 70 years, which you will be when you're 25. And if you just get 9% a year, which sounds terrible, but that's what the NASDAQ's done, or excuse me, the S&P has done since that means in 24 years, right, you're going to have 8 times your money. And in 32 years, you're going to have 16 times your money. And when you're my age, even if you don't get an MBA contract or sell a novel or have your business sold, whatever it might be, you're financially secure. So it's appreciating time. And then the last thing, and this is underrated, and it's where I fucked up several times, is the power of diversification. I came out of the gates really hot. I made a lot of money. I started internet companies, was rich on paper, but I always doubled down on my companies. Red envelopes going public. How much do I have in stock? Well, Scott, you have 20 million in stock. I'm going to borrow 5 million against my stock and buy more stock, because anything I throw myself at, I'm such a baller, it's going to be huge. And I read these stories about Steve Ballmer borrowing more money and putting it into Microsoft, in it to win it. My board loves it, shows commitment. 2008 comes along, great financial recession. The market is bigger than any individual. My company goes from $7 a share to Chapter 11 in about 3 weeks. And I go from being worth millions or tens of millions to negative 3 million. And unfortunately, it was about the same time my oldest son had the poor judgment to come marching out on my girlfriend. In that moment in the delivery room where my kid comes out and I'm supposed to hear angels singing and bright angelic light, and I feel so nauseous and so ashamed that I let my son down because despite having made all this money, I am broke. And it's no longer about me. It's about taking care of him. And the feeling of, that the first thing I felt with my son was that I had failed him. And if I just diversified a little bit, if I just sold some stock and put it in some boring shit, if I just sold some stock and put it in bonds and different stocks and some index funds, I would have been fine. And now that I have money again and I got wealthy and sold my company hit my number about 7, 8 years ago, I do not put more than 3% of my net worth in any one thing. And if you'd asked me what investment I was most excited about, I would have said this AI-based healthcare company where they send text messages for preventive healthcare. I invested 3% of my net worth because I was really excited about it. It went out of business last week. It's a zero. It bums me out for about an hour because I have Kevlar, and that's what diversification is. It's a bullet to the chest, but I got Kevlar. Takes me off my feet. I get up. I have a little bit of a bruise, but I am fine. Whereas when bullets hit me when I was a younger man and I wasn't diversified, I was out. They were almost near-death experiences. So hope you're wrong. Hope that one company goes to the moon, but diversify. Because what Kahneman said, the behavioral economist that died a couple months ago, is the joy of going from 10 million to a billion won't be nearly as great as the misery of going from 10 to 0. So you don't need to go from 10 million to a billion. Go from 10 to 20 to 30 slowly and just be really happy. So anyways, focus times stoicism times the appreciation for time and diversification. So in sum, I know how to get you rich. That's the good news. The bad news, Jen, is the answer is slowly.
I love that answer. And then, what's interesting is everybody now, I think also because of Instagram, people are staring at everybody's lifestyle, and it's very popular and hashtag friendly to be an entrepreneur and do all these side hustles. But you actually talk about the fact that you're not such a fan of side hustles. Why is that?
If you're using a side hustle to workshop something, if you're doing side hustles, it means you have the wrong main hustle. The way you get wealthy is with a main hustle that you're really good at, and you take all the time you would have spent on a side hustle and you double down on your main hustle. Because being in the top 10% of tax accountants, assuming, and by the way, I'm not saying this disparagingly. Some people love the law. Some people love taxes. Some people are good with clients. They're good with numbers. They love tax strategies. Being in the top 10% of tax accountants gets you $200,000 or $300,000 a year. Being in the top 1% gets you $2 to $3 million. The difference between, and I'll use a sports analogy, between the number 10 golfer is $3 million a year versus the number 2 or 3 golfer, we're literally talking 0.2 strokes, is $30 to $50 million a year. You need that incremental energy doubling down, going 110% in your main gig. Otherwise, use side gigs to workshop a different main gig. But your goal is to find something where professionally, every waking professional hour, you're focused on one thing, and then the rest is for family and fitness. But spreading peanut butter across a bunch of different shit, I have never been successful at anything I didn't go 110% into. And when I hear people say they want to be an entrepreneur, but first they need to work for a while and they don't want to give up their job, I'm like, you're not going to be an entrepreneur. I mean, and also the thing I really hate is balance. I survey my kids, and when I say my kids, my students, I ask them, where do you expect to be economically? And by the time you're 35, 70-80% of them expect to be in the top 10%, and half of them expect to be in the top 1%, which I think is $700,000 a year of American households. And then I say, okay, what do you want in a job? Something rewarding, something I learn a lot. And the number one thing is I want balance. I'm like, let me get this. You expect to be in the top 1%, and you are under the delusion you're going to have balance. I have had periods in my life where I have good relationships. I'm fit. I'm donating time at the ASPCA. I'm taking care of my mental health. That is when I am losing money. And then there's been periods where I am making bank and my life feels like it is flying apart at the fucking seams. Like, and when I tell you, like, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. I have a lot of balance now because I had almost none in my 20s and 30s. Working this hard, my 20s and my 30s cost me my hair. It cost me my first marriage. And to be blunt, it was worth it because now I have a shit ton of time for my kids, for my own personal well-being. I do amazing things. I had a 5-year exhale where I no longer have any economic security. I can totally focus on my relationships and just having a great time. But if you think you're going to achieve any level of influence or economic security in a capitalist competitive economy without going all in, I mean, all fucking in, you are in for a rude awakening. Now, that's my way. It may not be the right way. If you want to work to live, not live to work, fine. As Lincoln said, God loved the common man. That's why he made so many of them. But you need to get in alignment with your partner and have a sober conversation that maybe we can't live in Manhattan or in Santa Monica. Maybe we need to move to Phoenix or move to El Paso or move to, you name it, low-cost area, St. Louis. And we're going to have a nice house, maybe, but not a fat house. And we're going to have to adjust our expectations around quality of life. And what I find causes more divorce and more dissent is not infidelity or a lack of shared values. It's not alignment around economic weight class. What's our approach to spending? Who's responsible for making the money? What economic weight class do we expect to be in, and who's responsible for getting us there and keeping us there? And when you don't have that alignment, and there's weird dynamics around control and expectations, and then people start hiding things from each other. 70% of divorce filings, people over the age of 40, are filed by women, and the vast majority of the time you can reverse engineer it to money issues. So I think it is exceptionally important that you have really open, sober conversations around your expectations and that your partner is aligned. And I see so much dysfunction in my friends' relationships around money, and no one's allowed to talk about it because we're all supposed to pretend that we're ballers and that, oh, I don't have a problem with money. Saying you have problems with money is like saying you're not worthy in a capitalist society. There's this implicit notion that you fucked up. And here's the thing. I don't care who you are. I mean, there's a few people, the 0.1%. Everyone has stress from money. I still have stress from money. There's still times I have more money than I ever thought I would. And sometimes I'm like, oh, fuck, we can't, where am I going to find money? We're renovating a house. Where am I going to find money for this? Or I just gave away money. Did I give away too much? I constantly have economic stress. And it was hands down my biggest source of stress growing up in my household. Hands down. But we're not allowed to talk about it. You need to have these conversations early and have a sober conversation around what economic weight class you need to be in and what are the sacrifices required to get there.
Well, I think also the young generation or today's generation, you're talking about balance. There's also a lot of issues with boundaries and all these other I call them very liberal woke-isms around the workplace, right? And also people are working now on Zoom. So there's much less interpersonal relationships, and people are working. They don't want to work anymore, but yet they want to live the lifestyle. What do you tell people? I mean, you just actually told people, but I think there's a disconnect between what people think is out there and what they have to do. And I don't see the pendulum swinging the opposite direction. I think people are becoming inherently more lazy, much more of a coddle culture environment where everyone gets a participation trophy. Nobody really wants to show that they're winners and losers. This is that to me is actually the epidemic that we're facing right now. Like I'm really concerned about the younger generation than anything.
Yeah, I do. I think there's an entire generation of men. There's 3 million able-bodied men between the ages of 25 and 54 who not only aren't working, they're not looking for work. They've just given up on work. And in a full employment economy, it's just like they could get a job. They've just decided any job they could get. I was on the board of Panera, and this was a good thing. Through the pandemic, there was a labor shortage. You can pretty much start tomorrow at Panera for $18-20 an hour, and that's not huge money. But if you're good and reliable, we go to a job fair. We used to get 100 applicants. Now we get 10. and will hire 5, and 2 will show up. 3 are just no-shows. And if you work hard, you're a good person, you have some EQ, without a college degree now, you can probably be making, I don't know, 60, 80, 100 grand a year, just if you're hardworking and a good person. And some people, young people, unfortunately, I think a lot of them have been told you can have it all. And so they're like, and then 210 times a day, someone is vomiting their experience at the Almond Hotel or the new Ferrari they just bought, and they're under the impression that everyone has that but them, and they can get that without hard work. Or they can be ridiculously fucking thin with a 6-pack and a hot boyfriend, and it's just going to happen for them. So we've created a little bit of unreasonable expectations. I'm more worried about young men. I think young women are, if you really think about statistically, young women are killing it. They're going to college in greater numbers. They're in urban centers. Women under the age of 30 are now making more money than men because they're graduating at 3-to-2 ratio from college. They're more mature. They show up for work on time. I mean, little things Yeah,
but you know what's happening with that? They're single and alone. If you are a woman who is capable and competent and can do all those things on your own, they don't want a man, because the men out there there's very few. And the few that there are going to be wanted by every single girl. So then they're going to go, right? So exactly it's right. Like, what do you do? And that's basically what's happening. I know more single great girls than I've ever had in my life, and very few eligible great guys. Very few. And the guys I know who I'm friends with, they have the pick of the litter. They can go out with girls who are like literally more than half their age, and those girls are like vying for them and dying to go out with them. So
we have, but both parties are to blame. Okay, young men, for a variety of reasons, some societal, some is on them, are economically and emotionally unviable. They're less mature. They literally mature. Their prefrontal cortex matures at a slower rate. They're not going to college. They've been told by the wealthiest, deepest pocketed companies in the world they can have a reasonable facsimile of life online with an algorithm. Why go out and make the effort to get friends when you can go on Discord or Reddit? Why get a job when you can make money trading crypto on Coinbase or stocks on Robinhood? Why go through the effort and the rejection and the humiliation and establishing the skills and getting your mom or your gay friend to dress you, working out, taking the risk, going to a place, putting up with the bullshit and the rejection of finding a romantic or a sexual partner when you just have you porn? And so you have an entire cohort of men who have sequestered from society. They don't get those skills. They go down a rabbit hole and they become almost sort of just non-viable mates. At the same time, because online dating is how people meet each other, women aren't interested in getting to a second date. What do I mean by that? You basically have height and wealth now are the key criteria for women. Humor, vibe, kindness, smell. None of these things come through online. So 50 men on Tinder, 50 women, and you highlighted some of this data. 46 of the women show all of their attention to just 4 men. And those 4 men can have a date every night. That doesn't encourage long-term, good, appropriate behavior, right? So you have all these women who all want the same guy. And if you talk to married couples who've been together 20 or 30 years, about 70, 80% of the time, they'll say one partner was much more interested than the other. And it's usually the woman was not interested. But I worked with him and he was kind, or I found out he's smart, or I met his parents and I loved the way he acted around his parents. I got to know him and there was something about him. I liked his hands and I started thinking about his hands holding my hand. Women have a much finer filter. And for a guy to get through that filter, he typically has to demonstrate excellence over time in a community where they're together in person. And so when you're online, there's basically only 2 criteria. For a guy, it's his ability to signal wealth by his credentialing around universities he went to, his current job. And for guys, it's basically, how does she look? Now, here's the thing about guys. Guys will find the majority of women, or a large portion of them, attractive. Oh, she has nice hair. I'd like to date her. Women are much more discerning. Women are like, oh, he went to Dartmouth, but I don't want an Ivy League guy. Oh, he's handsome. He went to a good school, but he's in the energy sector. That means he's polluting they will just literally swipe left, swipe left, swipe left. So my advice to men is simply put, get your shit together, get out, start making money. I don't care what it is. Get to the gym. I can find time in their phone on Coinbase, on Twitter, on porn. We're going to reinvest it in working out. We're going to reinvest it in making some money. And we're going to be in the agency of other people. I don't care what it is. Little, a softball league, church, a nonprofit. You have to get out of the house and be in the company of strangers and start demonstrating excellence to the same sex or the other sex. And what I tell women is, be open to a second coffee. Be open. I mean, if you really don't like the guy, fine. But if you think there might maybe something there, give him a second shot. Because I believe that essentially most women are under the impression that they can have that, what I'll call high status male, and having sex with him does not mean he's a potential viable relationship for you. And what you end up with is, I think, this inability or unwillingness to give men in the bottom 90 a second coffee. So everybody's going after the same guy. This guy has, like you said, champagne and cocaine in terms of his options, which does not promote something what I call Porsche polygamy. And by the way, that's the natural state of the world. The natural state of the world is a small number of men get to do all of the mating. That's how the world mostly is operated. In the U.S., we invented a middle class. 7 million men came home from war. They were in uniform. They were in shape. They had demonstrated excellence. We put money in their pockets. They were viable mates. That's what kicked off the baby boom. What we have now is an entire cohort of economically and emotionally unviable men. Women, it's not that they can't find a man. They can't find a man they want to date.
That's right.
What's happened is that 2 in 3 women under the age of 30, though, have a boyfriend. Only 1 in 3 men. Why? Because women are dating older. 24-year-old women are dating a 38-year-old guy. So the young guy has no options, because any kind of high status or remotely, shit together woman is going older. The problem is there's not as much household formation. People aren't having babies. 60% of people aged 30 to 34 in 1980 had at least one child. Now it's 27%. People aren't meeting. They're not falling in love. They're not having sex. 1 out of 3 men under the age of 30 hasn't had sex in the last year. Young people aren't having sex. And I say jokingly, but I'm sort of serious. My advice to young people is to go out, drink more, and make a series of bad decisions that might pay off. But if you have this incredibly fine filter, even politics, do you remember when we used to date when we were younger? Did you even know the politics of the person you were dating?
No, nothing.
I didn't care. We didn't talk about politics. I'm like,
no.
Does she seem fun? Would I want to have sex with her? Like, is she interesting? And then, okay, does she have nice friends? And that was it. I had no idea. And now everyone's like, well, if they're not red or blue, I'm out. I'm out. There's no way I could put up with this person. So we've created all these reasons for people to mark each other off of their dating list. I'm like, you got to be a little bit more open, and we need more third spaces. We need people to spend more time together so they can. We've all met that person. You saw pictures of them online. There's absolutely no reason you'd be attracted to them. And you see the way they move. You see the way they laugh. You see their vibe, and you just like want to be around them. You kind of slowly but surely fall in like, and then maybe fall in lust, and then maybe fall in love. And we're not giving young people enough environments to do that, and we're also not creating enough economically viable men, because the truth is, if we're going to have an honest conversation around mating, women mate socioeconomically horizontally and up, men horizontally and down. And when the pool of horizontal and up among men keeps shrinking because women are doing better, which, by the way, is a great thing, we should do nothing to do that. But the reality is, I don't care how many subscriptions to The Atlantic you have or how much you read the New York Times, women want a man. And their view of a man is that he makes as much or more money than me. And look, I know there are exceptions, but when the woman starts making more money than the man, he's 3 times as likely to go on ED drugs, and the likelihood of divorce doubles from the moment the woman starts making more money than the man. Women still look at men in terms of a provider and protector. And so I think there is reason. I don't want to have affirmative action for men. That's too politicized. But I do think we need to massively level up young people such that more young women and young men are more viable economically. Because I don't care how charming, how nice, how hard you work. If you can't support a potential spouse and her kids, she's just not going to want to have a long-term relationship with you.
100%. I could not agree more. But how do you get men? This is all great this is the truth, but how do you get people to actually implement and execute on that and leave their house and get off of social media and get off of the dating apps and go and do what you just said, which is go to a club, go to a restaurant in real time, get drunk, meet people, and do what I used to do, when I was young, right? Like, I feel like that was like what we needed to do. Now everything is just like, people don't even want friends. They're so isolated from even socialization. People don't even know how to socialize anymore. It's really like, you can go, I mean, even I bet when you go to dinner to a restaurant, just anywhere, you look around, the people sitting with each other, they're on their phones. They're not even communicating with each other or talking to each other.
At least the women are out, though. I was out and someone said, look over there, look at all those women on their phones. I'm like, but you notice it's tables of women? I'm like, do you see any tables of young men? The young men are all home. I mean, at least the women are out. Women have much stronger social networks. They take care of themselves. They're in better shape. They're professionally killing it. Globally, you've never seen a group ascend as fast as women. Over the last 40 years, the number of women elected to parliament has doubled. There are now more women globally seeking tertiary education than men. And when you look at some nations discourage or don't let women go pursue higher ed, that's remarkable. There's never been a cohort in America that's fallen further faster than young men. Men are now 4 times as likely to kill themselves. It used to be 3 to 1. Now it's 4 to 1. They are dropping out of the workforce. They're 3 times as likely to be addicted, 12 times as likely to be incarcerated. We talk about an opioid addiction problem. It's a male opioid addiction problem. 72% of ODs are men. We have a homeless problem. Well, yeah, but we really have a male homeless problem. 3 in 4 homeless are men. And so what do we have? Young men are really struggling. And here's the hard part. We can fix it, but we have there are programs to address a lot of these, but we don't have any empathy for them. They're paying the price of my privilege and my father's privilege. They assume that they have the same advantages I did, and they don't. They're not getting into colleges. Women, quite frankly, are not that open. Their sexual and romantic marketplace has been shut off for them. Corporations have figured out that women are more mature and more likely to go to an elite college, so they don't have the same economic opportunities. The bias is neutral to negative towards them. The education system really discriminates against men. You're twice as likely to be suspended on a behavioral adjusted basis if you're a male, 5 times as likely if you're a black male. Who works in schools now? It's between 70 and 80% females. There are more per capita female fighter pilots than there are male kindergarten teachers. So you couple that with the second most single family homes in the world behind Sweden, which is Latin for headed by a mother. You have millions of young men who until the age of 25 literally have no men in their lives. And this isn't an insult to the superheroes that are single mothers. I was raised by one of them. But the single point of failure for reverse engineering when a boy comes off the tracks is the following. He loses a male role model. And 1 in 6 men, when they get divorced within 3 years, no longer have any contact with their kids. And oftentimes aren't geographically close. And you have an entire cohort of men, of boys, who have no men in their lives. And that's when they become much more likely to engage in self-harm, much more likely to be incarcerated. Men play a really important role in boys' lives. What's interesting is the same study shows that girls have similar outcomes in the single-parent household. They're just as likely to go to college. They make the same amount of money. So the net of it is while boys are physically stronger, they're emotionally and mentally much weaker. And the presence of a male role model, and this is a shout-out. I try to get involved in young men's or boys' lives. You don't have to be a baller. You just need to be trying to live a virtuous life. And here's the problem. I was on the Bill Maher show and I said, if we want better men, we have to be better men. We need to get involved. I think the ultimate expression of masculinity is to get involved in the life of a child that isn't yours, specifically the opportunity as a young boy. And they're everywhere. You barely even need to cast a net and you're going to find that your nanny's kid is struggling, or you're going to find that your friend's kid is your coworker at work, that her son is really struggling. You're just going to find these men everywhere, everywhere. The ultimate expression of masculinity is to get involved in their life. And Bill Maher, I said this, and Bill Maher said, "Oh, I get involved in a 15-year-old boy's life, and everyone thinks I'm a pervert." And this is so sad. Michael Jackson and the Catholic Church have fucked it up for all of us because there's a ton of men out there that for whatever reason, maybe they're successful and they have their own kids, or maybe they don't have kids, and they feel a lot of paternal and fraternal love. They want to help boys and young men out. And I've experienced this firsthand. I had this guy across the hall in the apartments I lived with my mother. Nice guy. He was probably in his late 20s, 30s. Introduced himself. He was going horseback riding with his girlfriend. Came over and said, "Scott, want to come horseback riding?" She's like, "It's not a horseback ride." That guy took me horseback riding every other week for like a year or 2 years. This nice guy.
Wow.
I met a stockbroker. I bought stock when I was 13. This guy, Cy Sero, 45 years later, Cy and I still exchange text messages and used to give me lessons on the market. 2 of my mom's boyfriends stayed in contact with me all the way through college. And that male mentorship was instrumental in me not coming off the tracks. I remember one of them one time saying to me, I had dinner with him and he said, "Is that pot? Do I smell pot?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Did you smell it?" "No, I have a joint in my pocket." And he's like, "Okay, look, I love pot, but like, tell me about it." And I had a conversation with him about drugs. You can have that conversation with a man. I couldn't have that conversation with my mom. She just would have freaked out and she couldn't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So look, I'm a big believer that if men don't start getting involved in boys' lives, that we're not going to solve this problem. And unfortunately, there's a lack of empathy, and that void has been filled by some thinly veiled misogynistic voices, the Andrew Tates of the world that just say, "Be a baller, sign up for my crypto universe, treat women like property, act like a real man." That is not helping. But also, society has to recognize that if any other special interest group was killing themselves at 4 times the rate of the control group, we would move in with programs and opportunities. And there's no empathy for these kids.
The sick thing is just about Andrew Tate and that program. Not only are men are signing up by the droves, but the truth is, and I'm going to get a lot of heat for saying these things, and I do, but actually, women are drawn to those guys. Andrew Tate has no problem finding women. Yeah, there are a lot of women who hate him, but guess what? He's not hurting. And I can name, and I know a mazillion guys who are similar to him, especially in LA and in New York, who have a ton of money, let's say, and have an attitude and a bravado. Girls throw themselves at them. That is the reality. People don't want to hear it and they think it's not PC. Okay. But unfortunately, that actually is what's happening. And it's sad. It is sad, but that's the truth.
But you can't tell people who to be attracted to. And the thing about these guys is that the message actually starts off fine. It starts off positive, be in shape, be action oriented, make money.
Right.
Where it comes off the track is when you start saying, they start immediately go to, "I would never let my girlfriend go out alone." Right? She stays home from me. She cook. Sign up for my crypto university. Own a supercar. Like, it's all easy. You can be a baller like me. And it's like, okay, you're giving these guys no path. You're basically telling them to treat women like property. But yeah, it's really funny, Jen. Whenever I meet with women who, like you said, I meet with a lot of women, really attractive, really interesting, high character women, and they'll pull me aside and say, "Do you have anyone you can set me up with?" And I'm like, quite frankly, no. I'm still searching for the unicorn of a nice guy that's single right now, that makes a good living. I mean, I know a few of them, but for every one, I know at least 10 single women. And what's interesting is 50% of the time, they'll look at me and they'll go like sheepishly, like it's some big inside, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, I really like alpha men." Like, oh, no shit.
Yeah, exactly.
You mean you don't want some sensitive guy in a tweed suit watching PBS all day that wants to talk about his feelings and his hero is Alan Alda? Like, okay, yeah, words out that women like men. And distinct of what we read about, what people claim is a sensitive man and a new... Okay, fine. Women are attracted to guys who are in shape, who make a lot of money, and have a decent amount of facial hair. They essentially want a caveman with an Amex card.
Yes.
And, I'm not talking about what should be. I'm talking about what is. And when I talk to young men, I'm like, all right, how are you going to be more attractive to women? Like, what do you have to... Would you want to have sex with you right now? I mean, I ask these questions. Like, so what do we need? Mm-hmm. You need to get in you need to get in great shape. You need to get physically strong. You need to start making money. You need to have a plan. And that is, you don't have to be a baller. You don't have to wait till you make a bunch of money, but have a plan for God's sakes. When someone asks you what's your plan, have a plan. You don't even need to know that that is the plan, but have a plan and be tracking towards that plan and take care of yourself physically. Be kind. Kindness is actually attractive to women. There are 3 things women are attracted to. The first is the ability to signal resources. The second is intellect. The easiest woman, I always say this, the easiest way to get a woman naked is to make her laugh. And I realize that that's sort of triggering. It's like, I feel like, let me impersonate a woman. I'm laughing, I'm naked. If you can make a woman laugh, you can hold her hand and more. And then the third thing is kindness. And that is, don't be afraid to be a nice guy. Don't be afraid to show other people that you're respectful. Don't be afraid to have manners. That is attractive to women. They know if they start thinking about you long term, they start thinking, is this a kind of guy that is going to treat me and my children well? Anyways, I think about this stuff a lot. I'm thinking about writing a book called The Algebra of Mating, because I think there is a narrative around there around how people actually should find each other. And then I think there's what's going on. But the net of it all right now is an epidemic of loneliness. 1 out of 7 men don't have a single friend. 1 in 4 men can't name a best friend. People aren't having as much sex. Household formation is going down. Fewer and fewer people are having children. If it wasn't for immigration, we'd be in population decline. But I think this is sad, because when I think about the things that have really been rewarding for me, I'm known for as a business guy and talking about, but the most rewarding things in my life have been raising kids with someone that I care a great deal about. And the money has been a means to that, full stop. It lets me focus on that. But without that, yeah, the money would be great, but I don't think I'd have nearly as much satisfaction. And it makes me very sad to think that a lot of women and men who are decent people, high character people, for one reason or another, aren't going to experience that. I think it's really, I think it's upsetting.
I know it is. It's actually very upsetting. And I think I don't see how it does get, you should write the book. Actually, I think that would be a great book, because offline or whenever I talk about it, it is like it's a conversation topic that goes on a lot. And I think a lot of people are struggling with it. Not only the young generation, but even an older, in their mid 40s who are struggling. Like you said, for every eligible attractive guy, there's not 10 girls, 50 or 100. And unfortunately, I don't still with technology and AI, all the things, I don't really see it getting better unless people make a concerted effort to change and reframe how they think and do things. But that's that. I mean, I want to talk about now, we're going to switch gears. We're going to go pivot all the way here to, I would be remiss. I got to talk about Israel. I got to talk about Gaza and the war. You're one of my favorites to be talking to about this. And I want to ask you something, because I've been thinking about this a lot, about the algorithm, TikTok especially, 90% or I think 98% of the algorithm is geared towards Palestine, not Israel. How much of this, the Semitism, the vitriol hate, I think towards Israel is because of the algorithm is pushing certain content? What would you say to that?
Well, okay, so we have a division of the Army called PsyOps, and their job is Radio Free Europe, Radio America. Their job is to leverage our assets, our channels, and spread information that is pro-America. That's called propaganda. The greatest propaganda tool in history is controlled and influenced by the CCP. It's called TikTok. The frame through which people under the age of 25 see the world is this platform that's controlled or influenced by the CCP. 51% of kids under the age of 25 say they're either check several times a day or are constantly on TikTok. And if you look at the data, for every 1 pro-Israel video served on TikTok, 52 pro-Palestine videos are served. And you think, well, Scott, that's just young people or talented creators. You're being paranoid, and the algorithm picks up on it and exponentially serves more videos. There's nothing sinister. Well, okay. The control group would be Reels, which is the closest thing to TikTok. It's nowhere near that ratio. It's much more indicative of actually how young people feel. Actually, the latest survey I saw is that 55% of young people are actually pro-Israel and 45% are pro-Palestine. The impression we have because of this, what I call zombie apocalypse of useful idiots on campus, is that it's 90-10. It's not. They're more vocal, that the media loves to talk about what's going on at Columbia. They don't want to talk about an Israeli girl who was just elected president there. I've been at NYU. 99% of the kids are just going to class and trying to graduate. But there's definitely something going on. And on the part of the CCP, I don't even think it's anti-Semitism. I think it's their desire to polarize us and divide us. They can't beat us economically. They can't beat us militarily. So divide us. If people our age all were pro-Hamas and young people are pro-Israel, I think they'd be serving pro-Israel content. I don't think it's inherently anti-Semitic. It's just anti-American. They just want to polarize us. Now, there's a lot of things adding up to what ultimately becomes what I would call anti-Israel. I don't like to use the word anti-Semitic because I think that it's hard to accuse people of hating Jews. I think people will constantly say there's a difference between being anti-Israel and anti-Semitic, and I get it. What I'll call it is a level of double standards that is just striking that they don't even recognize. I had an argument with my co-host on Pivot literally an hour and a half ago. I had said my win for the week we do wins and fails was the dramatic and heroic rescue of these 4 hostages. And I said, okay, Israel's, the Gaza Health Ministry is reporting 225 deaths, which means it was somewhere between 0 and 225. These numbers are never accurate. And she got very upset and said, people died here. I mean, okay, the point I am making is that if you see a number from the Gaza Health Ministry, why on earth would the media keep citing these numbers when they know they're wrong and know they will inflate the number of children killed and people under the age of 18? If any other group was citing inaccurate data this consistently, they would no longer cite that data. And the reason Israel doesn't produce numbers is because they take the numbers seriously and they realize they can't determine the number of people killed for months at a time. The differences here, in my view, are just so striking, and I'm remiss to call them anti-Semitic. What I would call them is anti-Israel, that everybody, you get shouted down. I mean, people are really upset with me. I am not in favor of a truce. And that is, okay, it's 1944. We have turned back Hitler. Post D-Day, we are bombing Dresden and Hamburg. It is fucking horrific what we are doing to these people. We are killing women and children, right? We killed 45,000 people in Hamburg. 5 of them were civilians. We killed 100,000 people in one night in the firebombing of Tokyo. If they'd asked for a truce and we were winning the war and they held our hostages, would we have said, okay, let's give the Imperial Army and the Third Reich a chance to regroup? When have we decided, after being savagely attacked, that we're going to hold up and give them a chance to regroup? Now, some people would say, Scott, you're never going to do it. You can't kill Hamas. It's an idea. And I'm like, bullshit. We killed communism. We killed fascism. I mean, this sounds savage. They have invited war, and Israel has accepted their invitation. If the UAE and Qatar and the U.S. and Israel come to a solution that involves a truce and can guarantee the security of Israel, I'm all for it. Nobody wants to see this killing continue. Palestine now has the largest concentration of child amputees in the world. It is horrific. If we can figure out something that guarantees Israel's safety, security, I'm all for it. Until then, my attitude is we wage war. And I say we generously. And people say, you're comparing Hamas to Nazis? And I'm like, that's unfair to Nazis. The Nazis didn't use civilians as camouflage or ammunition. They used to send their kids into the country. The Nazi guards had psychological trauma from working in the camps. The Hamas combatants and fighters are leaving voicemails for their parents, shouting in glee. So I have what I'd call a pretty, I mean, I hate to use this term, but a pretty ugly view of this. And that is, I don't understand, every nation that's attacked this viciously is allowed to fight back to one condition: unconditional surrender, lay down your arms. all eyes on Rafah, all eyes on the hostages. I just don't. The way the Western media frames this conflict is so perverted and queered. If a Mexican cartel that was super religious had been elected to run Mexico, and they said, you know what? These white evangelicals in Texas have been savages to us. Do you see what they do to our youth? Young kids looking for a better life. They put them in cages. All of these things are true. They shoot at people just looking for a better life. They round them up on horseback. So we're going to build tunnels and we're going to incur into Texas on a per capita basis. Israel has 10 million. We have 350 million. We're going to slaughter the entire community of the University of Texas, Austin, 35,000 people. And on the way back, we're going to take the freshman class of SMU hostage and put them under Mexico City in tunnels. What would we do to Mexico? What would we do? It would be the great radiated snore parking lot. And when the whole world in the UN or the ICC was saying, save the hospital in Playa del Carmen, do you think we would give a flying fuck? Do you think we would be worried about collateral damage? And if you look at this war, when the real numbers start to bubble up, the humanity or the targeting or whatever you want to call this, of this war, according to John Spencer, who runs the Urban Warfare Institute at West Point, the ratio of civilians killed to combatants is lower here than it was in Germany, was in Japan, was in Mosul, has been in almost any war anyone can compare it to. The Israelis are prosecuting this war more quote-unquote humanely than any other Western democracy has prosecuted a war. I hope there's a ceasefire that all parties are comfortable with. Be clear, America would not sign up for a ceasefire if anything resembling what had happened to the Israelis had happened to us. It is, and also, Jen, you've spoken out. I'm sick of seeing you, Deborah Messing, and Jessica Seinfeld. I am really disappointed that more Jews aren't speaking out. And there's such a blowback because social media likes the algorithm and young people like to virtue signal, and some young people do feel very passionate about the issue. And we at universities have indoctrinated them into an orthodoxy that there's the oppressor and the oppressed, and the way you identify oppressors is how white and how rich they are, and ground zero for white and rich in terms of perception is Israel and Jews. I get it. I was stupid once. I'm more forgiving of them. These professors at my university in Columbia, joining hands with them? Let me get this. You don't have the critical thinking to not show empathy for an ideology that if it got traction in the United States would see our gay students thrown off a roof and women would be treated like property and there'd be gender apartheid? Well, guess what, boss? You're not paying us. You're not 19. You should be summarily fired. And they're like, well, what about First Amendment? First Amendment? Knock yourself out. Go to Washington Square Park and say whatever you want. There's no First Amendment at a private employer. It just strikes me that some of my colleagues think that under the notion of social protest, they can act like such village idiots, and we have an obligation to put up with it. I'm talking to the regents in the University of California. I think some students should be suspended or expelled. We should cut a wide berth for them, forgive a lot of them. The people who deserve to be swiftly and crisply punished are faculty who've gotten in the way of commencement, gotten in the way of our mission of educated students. Anyway, I am going way off script here. I have found at every turn, I find so few issues where you can have this level of moral clarity. I think we're going to look back on this and we're going to think, Jesus, just the both sidism here is so striking, is so unusual. And again, it just all comes down to the same thing. If it's non-white people killing people, whatever, it's page 7. If it's Jews engaging, BBC, four hostages rescued. First, it was released. Then they changed the word to rescued.
Yes.
And then the next thing, 247 people, Palestinians killed. Well, who's saying 247? Well, it's a source that we keep revising down the number. So look, I find this all very frustrating. I find it all totally two-sided. I am shocked by what's going on, absolutely shocked. The hopeful thing is that I'd like to think that the kingdom is going to normalize relations with Israel, which will create the ultimate Iron Dome. I mean, Jesus Christ, Jordan and the kingdom of Saudi Arabia were coordinating with Israel to shoot down the 300 projectiles coming in from Iran. What does the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Jordan know that these far left groups on campuses don't know? They want nothing to do with Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. They realize they bring chaos and violence. So I am discouraged, but at the same time, I think the Biden administration has been steadfast, mostly in their support. Some of their statements have made no sense to me, but we do have two Ford-class carriers sitting off the coast of the Mediterranean. I'm hopeful that we're going to come to some sort of solution eventually, but I want to be clear. I'm not sure if I were Israel right now, I would take a truce or a ceasefire, excuse me.
No, I agree. And listen, you know how I agree with you. And the couple things I want to ask you, because you're in the media, you deal with a lot, like your partner, Kara Swisher, I think also she's a journalist, and you were having this conversation with her earlier, you said. I mean, why? I guess I'm just asking you, podcast or not, like, why is the media so against the Israelis? And you're saying it's not anti-Semitism, it's anti-Israel. I think it's the same thing. And my other question is, what's like the self-hating Jews? Like, to me, these are the most frustrating. I don't understand it. Just as a human, I don't understand these two things. You know, one of the hostages that Noah, the really famous one, she was being held for the last 8 months in a photojournalist's house within like the Gazan people, who's a photojournalist for Al Jazeera. You don't find that.
To be fair, he was only credited on one article, but yeah, people have sympathy for these people. It's pretty dangerous work to house hostages. I mean,
sympathy for these people. They came out and pillaged after the Hamas massacre. You know that, right?
Like, yeah, we're of like minds on this. Look, I think a lot of people in the media, look, this is the first war being prosecuted on TikTok. War is horrific. America decided to have a media blackout. People think that those 400,000 people who died in Iraq and Afghanistan just kind of floated away. They didn't. War is horrific, and we're seeing that up front, and maybe that'll be a good thing, that over time we're more measured around war. When you incur the way you did into a nation like this, let me go back. I do think you can be anti-Israel without being anti-Semitic. I do think that Netanyahu... And there's a lot of people who are anti-Israel in Israel right now in terms of the 30% support of Netanyahu. I want to move to solutions, normalize relations with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, some sort of multilateral force that guarantees Israeli security. I'm all for making massive investments to upgrade Palestine, upgrade Gaza such that these people can live in some sort of dignity and that Israel has security. I want to get to the next side of this. I also think that we have to get Netanyahu out. 73 war, there was a reckoning. That's when Golda Meir came into power. I think we have to turn the page, and Israel needs to start working on its brand again. The hostage rescue is great for the brand. Them fighting back, I actually think long-term is good for their brand. Mm-hmm. But until we get Netanyahu out, who in my view, and I'm not telling Israel what to do because they're a sovereign nation, they get to pick their own leaders. But the reality is he has struck a deal with the extremists in Israel, and they have been, in my view, given way more oxygen and legitimacy to some very bigoted members of the Knesset. And we used to be the David. Now we're seen as the Goliath. We've got to go back to being the David. So it is a complicated, ugly situation. But the way the Western media frames it all is just incredibly strange to me. I don't fully understand it. Even my podcast co-host, she'll correct me on stuff. I find she's very exacting around this issue when it comes to data. And I think it comes from a good place. I think she wants to be empathetic, realizing the horrors of war. But this has taken me from center left. I won't say center right because the right's just so batshit crazy. I can't get over how the far left is behaving here. I just can't get over it. I just don't get it. And I think it's a lot of academics' fault. I think we've trained a younger generation to believe that you're either an oppressor or an oppressor. And somehow we've conflated white, rich people with oppressors, and that is shorthand for Jews in Israel. So anyways, a huge word salad. I'm hopeful that we can get to the other side of this sooner rather than later. I
believe that actually because of this, Donald Trump is going to win, even though he is convicted. He'll win. He might. By a landslide, because I think this just gave him the election personally. for all these people that I've spoken to who absolutely hated him with the vengeance are actually now swung the other way.
This is what I would do. I mean, I'm in brand and communications. If I were the Republican Party, I would just show footage of what's happened on campuses. I mean, like, this is what happens when liberal orthodoxy and democratic values take over our institutions. And I would show all of these, the worst moments at campuses. And unfortunately, the media has blown it up. There's been 2,300 arrests. Somewhere between 40 and 60% weren't even students. So it's been totally blown out of proportion. But there have been some horrific moments that moderates will look at and go, wow, the Democrats have really lost their shit here. Or I would just show what it's like in downtown LA, Portland, and Seattle, or San Francisco, these very democratic cities. I think you're right. I think Israel, what's happened in terms of the reaction in the U.S. is going to hugely favor Republicans. I mean, I'm questioning if Republicans had been the Republicans from the 80s and 90s, I'd be a Republican right now. Mm-hmm. I'm fine with John McCain. I'm fine with Mitt Romney. They've gone so batshit crazy, I can't be anywhere near them. But the folks on the Democratic side, the squad showing sympathy for terrorists for no other reason than just, as far as I can see, just bigotry. I think you might be right. I hate to admit it. I'm going to canvass for Biden. I'm going to give money. I'm going to do everything I can. But this is going to hurt us big time.
Massively. Is Kara your partner? Is she Jewish or no?
No, Kara's not Jewish. She's her wife. Her wife is Jewish, and by the way, I think her views are very empathetic. I think she wants to be balanced. I think she wants to make sure that we have our data correct. But I find the media, even the way the White House saved the hospital. We need to save our empathy for Rafa. I'm like, okay. The only things here are save the hostages. There needs to be unconditional surrender of Hamas. I don't. Right. That's the only thing I would repeat over and over.
Right. So then why would you even canvass for Biden? Is it because it's like you don't have any other options right now? Like, what about RFK? What do you think of him?
He's an anti-vaxxer. There's no way. I mean, death, disease, and disability for children. Is that what you want? He wanted to come on my podcast, and I wouldn't bring him on because I don't want to platform those views. And it's too bad because I think he's very good on Israel. I think he's very good on the environment. But I also want to be clear on Biden. Within hours of the attack, Biden deployed the SS carrier strike force forward, thousands of Marines. And I think he's basically said to Hezbollah and Iran, don't fuck with Israel. I do think that on the big picture stuff, America has gotten it right. And I think the Biden administration does deserve credit. Let me put it this way. What world leader has been more supportive of Israel than Biden?
You mean right now? Probably none. But I mean... Okay. But then why do you think that the right and Donald Trump will win then if you think that people think that way? I think most people, if you would ask them who are pro-Israel, would think that Biden is kind of a joke.
That's fair. Look, elections are a function of perception, not reality. But the reality is that Biden did immediately deploy enormous firepower, has coordinated. By the way, American intelligence was involved in the rescue of those hostages. When the rubber meets the road in terms of our security apparatus, our resources, our firepower, our brave men and women in uniform who he has put in harm's way sitting off the coast in the Mediterranean, it's true. Nobody else in the world has come to Israel's aid like that. And he's under huge pressure from the far left, but I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. And the reason I'm not voting for Trump, there's the whole rape thing, which kind of puts me off of him. But I think he's an idiot. I don't think he has the respect of the global community. And I think him trying to do anything geopolitically is a short term. It's like a cat chasing a red dot. I don't think anyone takes him seriously. I don't think he can get anything done. So perfect is not on the menu here. I would love to see someone else at the convention nominated. But if it's Biden, on life support, as long as he's got his team around him, I'm going to work very hard to try and ensure that he's reelected. This is stupidity, criminality, lack of empathy. Don't work as president.
And how about Kamala Harris? If something happens to Joe Biden, who may be on life support pretty soon, who knows? She takes over, and she hasn't really been that supportive, let's say, of Israel. And she's married to a Jewish guy, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Look, this is a classic example of someone being promoted out of her strength. I thought she was I thought she was really strong as a senator, attorney general. As a vice president, it just hasn't worked. She just hasn't resonated with the public. Things around bodily autonomy, Black Lives Matter, this rape trial. I mean, she's an attorney general. She could have spoken to Trump's legal woes, and the reality is her voice just hasn't resonated. So there's just no getting around it. Vice President Harris has been a disappointment, and I thought she was a great senator. She has an incredibly impressive record. She just hasn't resonated as a VP. We're in a terrible spot right now because the biggest burn or rub against Biden is in Israel. I think by the time the election comes around, it probably won't be that big a deal. It's really present for us, but I think most people have forgotten about it by the time the election comes around. The thing that was really hurting him is his age and the fact that he comes across as feeble. And here's the thing. Biology always wins. The best we can hope for is that it doesn't get worse. And it always does. It always does. I'm working out so fucking hard. I'm taking creatine, testosterone, and I'm still getting weaker, Jen. Biology always wins.
It's true.
It always wins.
It does. I'll send you some stuff, actually. Stay on. But
bring it.
You're right, by the way. Biology, you can't fight biology. And also, by the way, Donald Trump is no spring chicken either. How old is he? 76, 75? But people
he's 77.
70. Okay, and how old is Biden? They're not that far off in age.
Yeah, but I mean, the reality is I try to call balls and strikes. Biden just comes across as a lot older.
Does he ever? It's actually, I'm uncomfortable watching him. I feel like someone should let him have a nap. Like, I don't, it's uncomfortable, literally, because
I won't be able to watch the debates. I'm so worried about a McConnell moment.
Oh,
I mean, I think anyone, I don't understand how anyone with daughters could ever vote for Donald Trump. I don't like the man. I think he's an awful person. I think Biden is a really good man. I think he's actually been a good president. I think he surrounds himself with good people. Greatness is in the agency of others. I like the CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Act. I think he's actually, on the whole, been good on Israel. I think he has good instincts. I think he's a good man. If he had picked Whitmer, Newsom, Pritzker as his VP and had said last year, folks, I have served. It's time for me to spend time with my grandkids, and I'm endorsing my VP candidate, whoever it is. I think he would have gone down in history as one of the greatest presidents ever. Instead, he might put the worst president in history back in office, and it's the same narcissism that plagued Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We have lost bodily autonomy for women because of her narcissism. It's the reason we have too many Republican judges sitting because of Senator Feinstein's narcissism. It is a disease. It was time for him to move on. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a move if something happens, to nominate someone else at the convention. We'll see, but we are in interesting times, and it feels pretty good actually right now to live in London.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the politics and don't want to know anything.
Listen, I don't blame you, but I've taken up so much of your time, and I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
No, I appreciate your time. You're always so thoughtful in your conversation, and I always learn something. So let me tell everyone again, you guys, the book out, The Algebra of Wealth. It really is it's a great book. You know what also I love about it? It's like a coffee table book. You can put it down, pick it right back up, and always get something out of it. Like, it's not something you have to read all in one. And it's a great book to always, I think, to go back to and check out for some, to kind of get a reminder of something. And I really like it. So people pick it up. Where else can people see you and find you now besides your 97 podcast? The Pivot, it's called, one's Pivot, one's Prop G. What's the new one called?
It's Prop G Markets. It's all the same, Jen. I'm everywhere.
You are.
There's no place to hide. There's no place to hide.
There is. And I'm going to send you a bunch of stuff. I got to give you some True Niagen. Have you taken that before?
Send it. I'll take anything.
Okay.
I
Well,
literally, I'll shoot up. I'll take anything. I'm the guy
Okay.
who's like, oh, I don't care what it is.
Okay, good. You're going to text me your address, and then I'm going to send you a boatload of stuff. I'm going to send you protein shakes by Slate. I'm going to send you just a Magic Mind. You're going to be all longevitied up. You'll live till
I can't
150.
You won't recognize me the next time you see me.
That's right.
As long as I look like Brad Pitt, just send me that protein shake, whatever that is.
You want that concoction?
I want that look.
Okay, good. I'll get it for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Congrats on your success.
Oh my gosh, you too. Thank you.